All right. Well, you're welcome to Communication in the Real World. We're still in chapter one, and we went over the few things. We defined what communication was. We talked about the different things that communication allows you to do: manage your identity, share and learn through social connections, manage interpersonal and professional relationships, establish and meet your goals, and influence other people. These are things that you can accomplish just by way of effectively communicating. We had an opportunity to discuss the role that communication plays in the quality of relationships. And you all gave some really good feedback about that and reinforced what you understood to be the role that your speaking plays in helping to foster healthy and even fix toxic relationships or any relationship that may be dysfunctional. And you talked about somebody you admired and what their communication style is and why you admire them. And then you also talked about what good communication skills can do for a career, especially the ones that you're preparing for. So I thought we had a really great excuse me discussion on that. We also talked about the five main forms of communication and how the intrapersonal communication is key because those are the conversations that you have with yourself in your head. And what I want to say there is make sure that you manage that you maintain it to be healthy, because that will inform everything that comes out of your mouth thereafter. You want to nurture good thoughts. You want to fill your minds with credible information, excuse me, solid information, so that you always speak credibly. And then also the interpersonal communication or the conversations that you have with other people, one, at least one or two other people. And, the group communication are those ones, communication encounters that you have with three or more people, like you're going to be doing in your class when you do your speeches. You'll be speaking in front of an audience. Or if you were in a meeting at work, you're sitting around a conference table or something, and you speak up, giving a status report or answering a question, you'll be engaging in group communication. Public communication is when a sender is focusing on a message, conveying information to an audience. You'll also have the opportunity to do that when you give your formal prepared speeches for the class. And so you get to practice being a public speaker. And then last but not least is mass communication. And that occurs when messages are sent to large audiences using print and or electronic media. Okay. And you talked about definition for you of what you understand communication to be and how your definition differs from the book and why you chose to define communication in that way based on your lived experience. And I actually found your definitions quite enlightening because there's so many different definitions of communication, and like you said, it is based on one's perspective, culture, and experience. So that's one thing you got to do yesterday. There is a reflection assignment that I want you to do, and I'll post this in the chat uh, for later. And I want you to respond to this probably by the end of next week or so. But I'll post the dates in which this will be due. I want you to keep track of the forms of communication that you use throughout any given day. I want you to think about it. Think about the five forms of communication and then keep track of the forms that you use, like in real life. And then make a pie chart of how much time you think you spend on average engaging in each of those forms. Okay? Think about how often you talk to yourself interpersonally, how you talk with others interpersonally, whether you speak up in groups. And I know, Tariq, you said you're not very expressive all the time. You prefer to hang back and kind of be more silent, but that your parents are trying to draw you out, which is a good thing because you need to be able to communicate professionally for advancement. If you've ever had to give a speech for another class or in some community group or at church, think about that. Maybe once a year or twice a year, or if you have ever, or maybe when you were in high school or some other class, like I said, course on campus. And then mass communication. Communication. Are you on social media? Do you blog? Do you use Twitter a lot, or what are are you using TikTok or any of those things? So take an assessment of that and keep track of it. It will surprise you. I'd be very curious to know how often you use these different forms, and I'm sure it'll be enlightening for you too. Okay, so think about that. All right, so today we're going to talk about the communication process, because communication is a complex process of encoding and decoding messages through different channels. And it's important to understand what these models are. There are three communication models that I'm going to introduce you to today. And not that they do justice to this whole phenomenon of communication. I think it's hard sometimes to determine where, communication starts and ends, because, the nonverbal communication is loud. Your body speaks. And even though you're listening, you're still conveying information to the sender. And so these models of communication can simplify the process for you to understand, because it is a visual representation of the various aspects of a communication encounter. But I do want to say that even though these models illustrate visually, what goes on during a communication encounter, it doesn't really recreate what we experience in real life. It's, way more complex than that. But becoming aware of how communication functions, and you more deliberate about your communication encounters, can go a long way to help you be better prepared in the future. Okay, and you can learn from your previous communication experience. So I want you to be thinking of how you can apply these things in your real life. Okay, so there are three types of communication models. The first one is a transmission model or linear model. The second one is the interaction model of communication. The third one is the transaction model of communication. Now, although these differ, they contain some common elements, and we're going to cover that in a minute. I'm going to play a short animated video that's going to explain what I'm just about to tell you now about the three different communication models. So like I said before, these communication models are not complex enough to truly capture all the things that take place in a communication encounter, but it can help you examine the various steps in the process so that you can get a better understanding of your communication and the communication of other people. All right, so the first one is the transmission model or linear model. So this model describes the one-way process in which a sender encodes a message and then transmits it through a channel to a receiver who decodes it. Okay, so you have a sender who encodes a message and transmits it through a channel to someone called the receiver, who has to decode what they've just taken in. All right, that's the first model. Now that's simple. All right, but that's way too simple, because of course this whole communication phenomenon is very complex. So the interaction model accommodates a lot more for the loop in which there is more of a two-way process that happens when people take turns being the sender and receiver, and they generate meaning by sending and receiving feedback within the physical and psychological context. Okay, because even though you're speaking and the person is listening and not necessarily saying anything, they're nonverbals. That's their body language speaks, their body speaks. We have a whole chapter that we're going to talk about nonverbal communication. So this model takes that into consideration. So both parties are sending and encoding and receiving and decoding simultaneously. And then also this model does take into consideration that there is an environment where there's noise, and the noise can be psychological or even physiological. So maybe there's sound that's distracting you, or you're distracted mentally where there's noise. So that distorts the message and it causes misunderstanding. That happens all the time, because even think about yourself. Someone's talking to you, you're daydreaming, or you're thinking about lunch, or something comes into your mind and you like lose focus on what they're saying, even though physically you're looking like but mentally you're checked out. That happens. And then lastly, the transactional model, which is a lot more complex in that it takes additional things into consideration. And so this model describes a process in which communicators generate social realities within the social and relational and cultural contexts. So this model includes everything else from the other two models, but it also includes the fact that the participants are, sending and receiving, of course, and then also they're taking into the consideration, their communication competence, their communication environment, and the relationship and the situation. So a lot more things are happening all at once while this communication is happening. Okay. So I hope that was clear. I know I said a lot. Do you have any questions so far?
No.
Was it clear?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to play this really short video that will also illustrate what I just said. And I'm going to ask you some questions right after, okay? So please confirm that you can hear the video and that you can see it.
Hello, and thank you for
Yes.
selecting this virtual lecture. Today, I will be breaking down the three models of communication: the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. Let's get started. Before I explain how the communication models work, it is important for us to have a basic understanding of what communication is. Communication can be defined as the sending and receiving of messages to create shared meaning. The linear model was scholars' first attempt at explaining how this process works. It states, when communicating, a source will encode a message or take an idea and give it meaning through words and send it to a receiver through a channel, or the medium through which a message is delivered, such as a phone, computer, handwritten note, or even face-to-face. Once the message is sent, it is up to the receiver to decode or draw meaning from the message. It also recognizes that both physical and psychological noise play a large role in how we both encode and decode messages. While the linear model was an excellent start, scholars believed that this model was missing some very key elements. So, they created the interactive model of communication. Just like the linear model, the interactive model states that during communication, there is a source encoding a message, sending it through a channel, and a receiver that decodes the information. However, it also states, as the receiver is being sent a message, the receiver is also sending feedback to the source through their verbal and non-verbal responses to the message. Additionally, the interactive model recognizes that communication can be influenced by the environment or the context in which communication is taking place. For a while, scholars were satisfied with the interactive model and its approach to how human communication functions, but they still felt as though something was missing. They sat down once again and created the transactional model of communication, which states that while all of the elements of the interactive model are true, there was one element that was absent: the fact that when communicating in the real world, each individual takes turns being both the source and the receiver. And sometimes we are both source and receiver simultaneously. In this video, we took a look at the three models of communication: the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. I hope this helped you to better understand how human communication works. Thank you again for selecting this virtual lecture.
Okay. So that, excuse me, helped to illustrate the points I was making earlier. So who can tell me what is encoding and decoding? What do you understand by that? Soraya,
You said what is encoding?
and decoding.
It's like, is it like giving the message a meaning?
Which one are you describing?
The encode?
Okay, and coding is what? You're on the right track. Just finish the thought. Hmm? Zariah, are you there? She freeze?
Can you hear me?
No,
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I said the encoding was like giving the message that they receive a meaning.
Okay, and decoding was what?
Um, I'm not sure.
Tariq, can you help her out?
I think decoding is what you take from the message, how you receive it.
How your interpretation of it. Okay, what do you understand by encoding, Tariq?
Encoding is the meaning you put into the message
Okay,
and the way that you send it through different types of communication.
channels. So, what are some of the channels, the medium that you send messages in?
Face to face. You got text.
Okay, Zariah, give us some channels of communicating an encoded message or decoding a message. What are some other channels?
Um, Social media.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Hmm.
What are some of the channels, the way you communicate? Think about all the channels that you use to express what you have to say and who you're sending it to, apart from social media.
Well, like Tariq said, face to face.
Yeah, I heard what Tariq said. I'm asking you different things that he didn't say. There's a lot, and I think it was described. Soraya, you don't know what a channel of communication is?
It's different ways you communicate.
The channel through which the messages are sent. Were you paying attention?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the linear model of communication? How do you describe that?
Um, we, sending and receiving of messages.
Okay, how does that differ from the interaction model of communication?
You said how is it different from interaction?
The second model, because there were three models. I described the three and the video described the three. Did you notice any difference between the three?
Yes, one of them take turns being the sender and receiver.
Which one takes turns being the sender and the receiver?
Their interaction.
Okay. Tariq, what about the transactional model? What is the difference between the transactional model and the interactive model?
I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm not exactly sure with that one.
Okay. The third one, the transactional model, takes into consideration the situation and the setting and the context of the sender and the receiver. But the other two models consider the channel. Of course, all of them have send encoding and decoding, taking noise into consideration. But the third one also incorporates social setting, the situation, and how the sender and the receiver are feeling and what situations they're in. So this is a question for both of you. How might knowing the various components of this process help you in your academic or professional life? Do you know if there's any way, like if you know these different things about the way we communicate, the different elements, do you know any way that it can help you in your communicate in the process of your communication academically and professionally?
You can pick the best time to use each one that would most benefit your situation. If you know which one to use.
Okay. Soraya, do you have anything to add there?
Yes, I agree with what he's saying. Like it depends on the situation. As far as my career, I would have to like take turns being the sender and the receiver. So I would like kind of use that one.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some particular principles of communication because taking this course should change the way you view communication. I mean, that's the goal. We want to encourage you to put communication at the front of your mind, becoming more aware about how you talk and being more informed about the positive effects that being a competent communicator has. So, everything we talk about, the different concepts and theories, try to see how you can apply them in your group communication to improve your performance overall. And also, you want to apply these concepts in every aspect of your life because this does impact your life academically, professionally, and even your civic engagement. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, how that communication affects you. It's integrated into every aspect of your life. If you can make the connections between, the things that you're learning in this course with other courses, and maybe courses that you've even taken in the past, it'll help you a lot. Um, the connections that you see and applying them just makes you more aware and gives you much more confidence, and you can be more competitive as well. And it'll benefit you as a student because research shows that people who have poor communication skills can really improve verbally, non-verbally, and interpersonally just by making a little effort by taking a course like this. There's research that shows that, but you just don't want to focus on the theory to pass an exam. You want to try to live it and look at the lived experience. You know, it says that poor communication skills are shown to contribute significantly to a person's poor performance in their first year of college. So students who take a communication course find out that they're more confident in their communication abilities and it helps their GPA at the end of the day. So much of what you learn here can be applied in your interpersonal interactions and also, your interactions with your classmates and your professor and even in group exercises when you're talking to people and listening to them. Okay. So these skills and knowing, how they can be applied into different contexts, like you said, situationally for your job and your career, Soraya, as a social worker, and even for you, Tariq, as a computer science major, can really put you in a strong standing with employers. You know, this communication is integrated into all aspects of our starts. The National Association of Colleges and Employers has found that employers really desire good communication skills in the college graduates that they hire. They desire that, they covet that because they know if you are a strong communicator, you'll represent the organization well, you'll be able to show those competencies such as listening and writing and expressing your ideas in ways that really help their bottom line. So you want to make sure that you build these skills into, your future plans on how you're going to sell yourself during interviews. Make sure you let them know you studied communication, you took a course in college, um, speaking better, communicating better, and that you have certain skill sets, like motivating and persuading, being part of a group discussion and solving problems. Okay, because these are highly sought after skill sets by potential employers. And this job market out here is quite competitive. This DC area, if you plan to stay around this DC area, you're going to have to really leverage everything you've got because the competition is, fierce. So being able to express yourself in ways that make sense, make you position you strong, is priceless. And also think about the civic engagement, making those connections between, how you communicate, how you speak, and your civic engagement. And civic engagement just refers to, you working to make a difference in your community by improving the quality of life for your community members. When you find your voice, if you found your voice, it'll be easier for you to help in, to push awareness about, social issues, cultural or political issues that concern you and your interests. All right. So make sure that you are informed about how to participate and communicate with those people who can make those decisions, such as your legislative representatives at large, the local, state, and regional levels. And if you can, have your voice heard and put in your 2 cents, vote, represent, serve your community, okay? Because that's important as a professional. And your communication skills is going to help you do that. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to continue. Communication meets our needs. And I know I talked about this yesterday, but, you being a good communicator satisfies your physical need. Physically and psychological well-being is a factor of how you speak to yourself intrapersonally. I hope that you are nurturing good thoughts. You're not paralyzing yourself by negative thinking. You know, try to arrest any negative thought that's causing you to be stressed or anxious. Some people have, anxiety because they think about negative things all the time and it hurts them. It hurts their mental health. So, the way you speak to yourself and the way you allow others to speak to you, and even if you're in a toxic environment where you're not hearing the positive messaging you need, you can check that. You can control what you nurture in your mind. So just know that communication meets certain needs. Protect your thoughts, protect your heart. Okay. And then instrumental needs. You can communicate and help yourself to achieve short and long-term goals, such as influencing others and then also, asking for support and giving support, getting information you need. So know that, very important. And the relational needs are also provided by your communication skills. You maintain relationships. We talked about this yesterday, how your communication patterns help your relationships or hurt your relationships. And I think Tyreek said it yesterday that if you are not really responsive, it can hurt and you probably terminate those relationships by not really responding. I mean, if I call you 3 times in a row and you don't respond, at all, call, text me. I mean, I'll think there's a problem and I'll be mad. I'll be like, well, why are you not responding? Or if relating with people and they're just giving you one-liners and they're having closed canned responses, it just doesn't really help the relationship develop or grow. They don't know what's going on with you. So communication meets your relational needs. So be mindful of that. Professionally, you have to know how to express yourself and give feedback, give information, keep people informed. And when they ask you, be generous enough to, press yourself to respond relatively in ways that they can feel reassured. That helps you manage the relationship. Okay, and lastly, communication helps to meet your identity needs. Okay, it allows you to present yourselves and others in particular ways. You know, present yourself, you want to come across a certain way. So the way you talk definitely tells that message. It definitely gives a narrative when you're not in the room. They're going to remember what you said, how you showed up, you know, the way you dress, your gestures, your facial expressions. All of that goes to telling the story of who you are. So if you want to manage your identity like a brand, you got to communicate consistently, professional, strong, competent, likable, credible, intelligent, agreeable. You know, there are things that you can do to communicate those words. All right. And the certain characteristics, there's just 4 characteristics I'm going to touch on really quick. You know that communication is a process. We looked at the models. There are 3 models. It's a process. One person sends a message, the person receives a message, and it's back and forth. It also happens simultaneously. So just know that, you know, your messages are irreversible. When you send out that information, it's out there, you know, and when you put it out there, people can take it and interpret it in different ways. So just want to make sure that you're taking the time to build messages that are easy for people to understand so that you won't be misunderstood or misrepresented. Communication is guided by culture and context. You learn to communicate using systems that vary based on your culture and language. We speak English in North America. If you were born in Africa, you speak, I mean, there's so many different languages in Africa and even in Europe. So, you know, depending on the language you were given through your first culture, which you received from your parents, the people who raised you, you know, that's going to dictate how you communicate. So empathy is important. And all these different languages and symbols, they're governed by rules and norms and uh, laws. You know, just know there's semantic rules, there's phonological rules, there's syntactic rules for every language and every group. And even organizations have their own jargon and certain rules for culturally communicating things. So be mindful of that. Communication follows rules and norms. And also, communication has ethical implications. You know that. Communication ethics varies by culture and context and definitely involves the negotiation and reflection of our actions regarding, you know, of what we think is right and wrong. So just be mindful of that and be clear on that and always be cautious that you're thinking before you speak because there are ethical implications. Do you have any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to have you answer some of these discussions in the Blackboard weekly assignment. For the sake of time, I'm going to bypass this here and move forward so that we can get through this class content today because we're finishing chapter 1 this week. All right. In the absence of any questions, I'm going to cover the characteristics of communication. I'm sorry, not characteristics. I did say that already. I'm going to cover the 10 speaking and listening competencies that I would encourage you to learn before you graduate from college. And this list is provided by the National Communication Association, NCA. These are 10 things that you should be able to check. These are metrics that can help you to know what you need to hit and cover and learn, okay, before you graduate. And communication is a process. Give yourself some grace and time to improve, but just know that it can be done. It can be done. Number 1, you want to be able to state your ideas clearly. Be clear on what you want to say and know how to say it clearly so that people understand you and what you say is useful. And you're going to reduce the misunderstandings and miscommunication if you learn how to state ideas clearly. All right. Secondly, communicate ethically. Be ethical in the things that you say. Be fair. And that's going to ask a lot of you. You know, you're going to have to know how you speak that is respectful, how you communicate that is respectful, and what is appropriate. Okay. That's the third thing. Recognize when it is appropriate to communicate. Sometimes you just want to be mindful that you need to sit back, hang back, and listen, especially if you don't know something. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable with silence. They want to fill the space with sound. Don't worry about that. Learn to be comfortable with silence because sometimes it's more appropriate to, hang back and respond at the end, or even communicate in a different channel, maybe an email or a text, So just learn that. And then four, identify your communication goals. If you know what your goals are for the career you're choosing or for the life you want to live, or the persona, the personal brand you want to be, you've got to identify those. What three things do you want people to know about you or think about you when you're not in the room? Okay, so be mindful of that. Five, select the most appropriate and effective medium of communicating. Sometimes a message is better sent by email where you can document that you've shared that information. You want to email and write well. Sometimes it's better to call as opposed to driving all the way downtown where the call could have, taken care of the matter. And other times it's important for you to talk about important things in person. Okay, so just make sure you're clear on the most appropriate medium. And you gave me some mediums before, the channel as a medium. If it's a letter, if it's a social media platform, if it's in person, if it's a telephone, if it's an email, if it's a text, if it's a letter, like a physical letter where you're going to mail it. Okay, so what mediums are the best? 6, demonstrate credibility. Make sure that you know what you're talking about and that you are credible as a speaker, and you're making sure that you're sharing information that you are qualified to speak about. If you're not sure about something, you may not, just be sure before you speak, because, you're going to build a reputation, and your reputation is your most valuable career asset. You'll come to find that once you start working. And once you build a reputation, it's going to be hard to, change it. It can be changed over time, but you're going to do a lot of, you're going to make a lot of, you're going to have to make a lot of effort to do that. You want to make a good first impression, demonstrate credibility as much as often as you can in the way you communicate. Excuse me. Write well, speak well, talk sense, be responsible with your words. Number 7, identify and manage misunderstandings. So important. Again, your reputation is your most valuable career asset. You want to always maintain peace with everybody. Speak in ways that are mindfully respectful. If someone misunderstands or has a problem, try to sort it out. Give more information to clear things up. You never want to burn your bridges. All right, and that's why number 8 is so huge. Manage conflict. There is opportunity in conflict, because if you see the opportunities in it, you can learn. You can learn what went wrong. How can I grow from this? How am I coming across? What does the other person want? And just if there's any way you can manage it and just fix it as much as you can, especially in the workplace, in the school, try to do that. Okay. 9, be open-minded about another person's point of view. Like we talked about cultural differences and contextual differences and generational differences. And there's so many different perspectives out there, and we're all having a right to them because we're different. We're raised different. No two people are alike, so we can't all think the same. And if someone doesn't agree with you, show empathy by trying to suspend judgment just long enough to see where they could be coming from with their point of view, no matter how dumb you think it is, or no matter how uninformed you think it is, or no matter how different or diverse it is. You might just want to pause for a minute to consider where they're coming from. Okay, so it's good to be open-minded about it. And lastly, listen attentively, because you might just learn something. While you're open-minded and trying to understand somebody else's perspective, be prepared to take in the new information and be better, even wiser. As brilliant as you are, you can still grow more. And you're already informed about your perspective. You already know what you think about. How cool would it be to kind of understand where someone else is coming from? That'll just make you better. So you've got your perspective and theirs. How cool is that? So those are 10 speaking and listening competencies that the National Communication Association wants you to learn and have before you graduate. Okay, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some planning, some intentionality, but it can be done. You'll be the better for it. All right. And lastly, overcoming anxiety. I'm going to post this in the discussion. In the assignment for Thursday for you to list these 10 ways for you to overcome anxiety. Okay. I want you to know that decades of research conducted by communication scholars show that communication apprehension is common amongst college students. So if you're uncomfortable giving prepared speeches or, uncomfortable with public speaking, you're not alone. It is very common, not only with college students, with most people. Most people can do it, but they don't like doing it because people are so judgmental and they know it. So they shy away from, speaking in front of an audience. But that anxiety can be managed, and there are strategies to help you manage it. This is a course that's going to cover that. We have a whole chapter that's going to address this, but I wanted to mention this now and give you a lot of time to think about it so that you prepare really good for your speeches when the time comes. You'll be giving your final presentations late April, early May, and we'll walk you through each and every aspect of preparing for that speech. But I want you to confront it. Just know that you're not going to die of embarrassment and that there is a strategy for you to excel. All right, we'll have you do this on Thursday. Do you have any questions for me?
No.
Tariq, any questions?
No.
All right, so in the absence of any questions, I'm going to adjourn for tonight. Pay attention to the announcements for when your assignment is posted for Thursday, and I will see you on Monday in person. MLK 227. All righty, have a great weekend.
Me too.